Welcome back. On today's episode, I'm going to be showing you one of the hidden tools on Property24 that I think you can use to your advantage if you're a property investor or someone just wanting to know a bit more about areas and trends, things happening around you in the property market. Welcome to the Property Corner with myself, Rowan Alexander. Property24 is a household name in South Africa. It's the go-to place if you're looking for a property to buy. It's a one-stop shop where you can see pretty much every agent's stock. Gone are the days where people would typically go to a individual agency and go and look to see what's in their windows, and stop by. With the power of phones and tech nowadays, Property24 has completely taken over that market. Now, that also allows them to put together some good statistics because they've got all this data. And the great thing is that they're sharing it. So I wanted to talk you through the process of actually getting some insight into suburbs on Property24. If you've listened to my buyer's guide, the 10 steps to buying, first-time buying, you would have noticed that even in that, I said you use your property portals, things like Property24, to gain an understanding of areas, because you can look at the different houses. Often there's some suburb write-ups that help you understand those areas better. But there's an advice section with trends and statistics. Now, trends and statistics might not appeal to everybody, data-driven decisions, but I'd encourage you, have a look at it. So if we go onto the homepage, on the top right, you'll find an advice tab, and then you can scroll down to trends and statistics. If you click that, it will open up this page that I'm wanting to share with you. This is the homepage for the trends and statistics that are put together by Property24. And it starts off by default looking at South Africa as a whole. Now, you might not, it might be interesting for you to scan through these figures for the first time, but you'll see what's great is you have the ability to either, by way of map search, drill down into, for instance, a provincial level, where you can start getting information about the Western Cape as a province. Or if you start drilling down even further, you can scroll down to a suburb level, as an example, Durbanville, or even within that suburb, you can go to the suburbs contained within that town. That's probably the correct terminology. So here we go. Durbanville as a town is made up of multiple suburbs. Valmery Park, as an example, is one. And now we can start having a look at a whole bunch of statistics that are made available, particular to Valmery Park. So this is very powerful. You get whatever level and drill down you want to be at, whether it be on a provincial level, regional level, town level, suburb level, all of this data set below are then adjusted to be representative of the area reflected above in the map. What you can also do is you can go to the top and do a traditional search, whereby you select a suburb. I'm going to show you the Brackenfell way, and I can say search. And it will now show me all the statistics for the Brackenfell suburb. So whether I go by way of map search or using the search bar functionality at the top, this will always filter the data to be relevant to this particular suburb. So looking through some of these statistics for the Brackenfell area, the red line is representative of the asking price. So this would be taken from all the listings that are on Property24 under the Brackenfell town. And they will look at the asking price, the average asking price for that year. So looking back to, say, 2018, we can see the asking price for all stock on Property24 was 1,700,000 Rand. Whereas in 2024, it's at about 1.8 million Rand. You can see that average asking price has been sort of stable over the last, call it 6, 7, 8 years. Now, we'll chat as to why that is in a bit, because you could look at this information and say, well, prices have remained the same since 2018, and that would be completely wrong. So I'm going to give you some words of caution when looking at these, and maybe some insider insights into why these statistics may be reflected in this way. So the second line, this blue line, deals with the average selling price. Now, again, looking at this, you might say, well, in 2022, the average asking price was 1.85, and the properties only sold for 1.575. And that's a 15 or 20% below asking price, and you might make the assumption that you should be able to buy a property for 15 to 20% below its asking price in the Brackenfell market. And I can certainly assure you that's not going to happen. That's definitely not the case. The market is too strong. Demand is too strong. I've been trading in this area since 2011. There's no way that in a normal market, as an average, you would be buying properties between 15 and 20% below market value. I'll just explain that now. Then looking at properties for sale, you'll see the different stock levels. So that next graph deals with the total number of properties in the market. In October 2023, it was sitting at 1,100 properties, of which new properties introduced to the market in that month were 300. You can see that remains relatively stable up to September 2024, which is last month. Again, total stock on the market sitting at around 1,060, and new to the market about 180. So there's some fluctuations in stock, new stock being introduced into the market over the past 12 months. And if you track this closely, you'll see the new introductions might have been slightly higher prior to the elections, or when interest rates were at their highest. December, you can see very little new stock coming to market. And if you're seeing similar trends throughout different suburbs within a province, or different suburbs across the country, you can start picking up on whether these are macro trends or whether these are particular to the suburb. Again, some interesting information, things like the makeup of the stock, whether that area is predominantly 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom houses. Make sure that you understand this doesn't differentiate between sectional title and homes. So freestanding homes. So it's again, it's just a total market stock count. You look at this and you may say, hey, well, there's more 2-bedroom properties in Brackenfell than what there are 3 bedrooms, and that would be correct. But again, it wouldn't be representative of the feeling that you would get if you're driving through the area, because if you have a sectional scheme that contains 150 or 160 apartments, it's sitting on a smaller piece of land within the suburb, and you're not going to feel like a sectional title a suburb, if that makes sense. You do get certain areas, a lot more urban areas like the Cape Town CBD, where your sectional title is predominant. This market, even though these figures may look like it, the urban landscape definitely doesn't reflect that. And then you'll start seeing the average asking price for number of bedrooms. You can see a 3-bedroom asking price average sits at about 2.2 million. The 2-bedroom average asking price sits at about 1.25, and the 4-bedroom sits at about 2.55. Now, again, yes, something that you can pick up on is that going from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom may only be a 400,000 Rand price increase, and from a 4-bedroom to a 5-bedroom, you're looking at about another, 800,000 Rand price increase. But the big jump is from 2-bed to 3-bed, because that's typically where the transition goes from. In the 2-bed market, you'd have sectional title apartments, but you'd also have townhouses. So both those products are classed as 2-bedroom and chucked into the same pool, and their average pricing reflected at 1.25. Out of experience, I can tell you that the townhouse average price for a 2-bed is probably going to be closer to the 2 million Rand mark, whereas your sectional title is probably going to be anywhere from 800 to 1.3 million Rand. So that average price there is probably heavily overpowered by the sectional title 2 bedrooms compared to your townhouses. Again, if you're looking through this and you then go and do a traditional listing search on Property24, looking at the two, I think it will help you understand these areas better if you are not from them. Then there's further information that gives you sectional scheme specific information, as well as the vacant land. So that would be based on number of sales as well as average selling price. You can see whether there is any form of correlation between the average selling price and the number of sales. and in areas that are new and developing, often on the urban fringes, you'll probably find that the sectional scheme number of sales are pretty high, as well as your vacant urban, because these are the two predominant development types, that would be registered at the deeds office. And it's showing you age profiles. So what is the age banding of your typical sellers, buyers? Is the suburb becoming younger? Is it becoming older? How does it compare? Who's moving out? Who's moving in? And who's sticking around? I think that's what you'll pick up from that age profile. Going down to suburbs within a town, like, for instance, that Valmery Park example that I showed, these things can be quite relevant because you may find suburbs within a town that have older properties and where people typically lived for longer durations, especially if they're close to schools and things like that. I myself grew up in a property where my parents lived for 30 years. You don't find that very often today. And these can help you identify the nature of those areas. Your newer areas, you'll find that typically have younger buyers. Just shooting back to the annual sales and listing trends and trying to just understand and provide some caution when looking at these statistics. I did mention the fact that you might make some incorrect assumptions when looking at these graphs, but if you're looking at the average asking price, you'll see that it's remained pretty stable from 2018 up to 2024. I can also tell you that the suburb, from trading experience, the average over that same period, capital growth has been about 8.5% per year. So to me, Rowan, the average asking price has still remained the same. And that's very often because as the property prices in the area escalate, the new purchasers start buying still within a certain price band, but they buy downwards in terms of size. So by looking at that, you can't just assume that property prices have remained stagnant over that period. What it doesn't reflect is the downward purchasing trend where people have actually bought smaller properties for higher values. Then looking at the average selling price and comparing that to the average asking price, it's important for us to look at this introduction or this note that Property24 puts on this. It says, this graph shows the annual number of sales registered in the deeds office, as well as the average selling price. Okay, so we know that they're using the average selling price, and the number of sales is that those two statistics they're getting from the deeds office. But then the red line is built by using all the asking prices of all Property24 listings for the same period. Now, the listing prices on Property24 representative of agent stock. So agents typically advertise on Property24, but you'll also find that there is the ability for private individuals to advertise on Property24, even though that is done in a very, very, very small manner or way. The predominant stock is agency stock. So if we're looking at the registrations, which is the deeds office, that includes every single transfer of property, whether it be sold by an agent, privately sold due to a deceased estate, liquidation, auction, transfer between partners, divorce settlements, any property that's transferred. So naturally, there will be a gap between what the asking price of the average home is that is listed on Property24 and the registration or the registered amount, because these two are two different data sets. The asking price is only a portion of the market. And to understand that, I draw now a Lightstone report based on the Brackenfell area, and we can have a look at the number of sales that registered versus the number of properties that are on the market, and I could show you that. But you can take my word for this, is that your registrations includes every form and every motivation for transfer. Any property that's transferred, doesn't matter why it's transferred, it would be included in that average sales price. Now, another thing to remember is in areas like Brackenfell, where there's a lot of new development, properties that were sold in a preceding period, like for instance 2020, might have been under construction in development for the remainder of 2020, as well as the 2021 year, and only handed over in 2022. They would be reflected in the registration figures for 2022, even though those sales already occurred in 2020 at the 2020 asking price. So can you see how there's a lot of information that needs to be contextualized before you actually just assume that properties are selling for 15% below the market value in this area? I can say again, there's no way that you will buy in a natural market a property for 15% to 20% below its asking price in this market. I know it like the back of my hand. There's no way that that's happening. Right, so it might sound like I'm contradicting myself and saying it's a useful tool to use, but then I'm cautioning you around every corner in using it. I think what I'm just trying to the message I'm trying to get across is that it's a useful tool to help you contextualize an area along with the traditional search functionality. If you're doing it from a distance or you're trying to understand the area better, use the two. Challenge your thoughts, challenge your assumptions that you're making along the way. And if you want some advice or you want some insights into these, feel free to reach out, send us a message, subscribe to our channels, and I hope you enjoyed this and found this useful.